Hello, humans. Welcome back. I hope that you're all doing well, that you enjoyed my first video. I was really trying to share more of my raw thoughts and, you know, create a space for us to get to know each other a little more as a community, a growing community, for you to know me as a person because behind every artist, there's a person. I want to discuss like a variety of subjects where I just dissect and question everyday life. The world needs critique to go forward, to move forward, to instigate change. And if there isn't any, then we become compliant and then we become accomplices. This subject that I'm going to discuss today, I think in particular, is one very good subject when you want to tackle those questions, and that is the idea of success or the fallacy of success. So, if you know me, you know that I identify as a more of like a radical person. What I mean by that is that I believe that politics should be applied in everyday life or else it holds no value. And so most of the positioning that I have as a political being, I try my best to practice in everyday life. In theory, people who fit into the mold where I fit also, like more of like people who are on the spectrum and just people who just defy what is called today majority, even though globally it's really a minority that is trying to become a majority. The world is really not built for us. And not only is it not built for us, it's meant to exploit us the most and throw us out, after that. People now have come so long into like a state of dissociation that they truly condone abuse and believe that it's the way to lead. The reason why I don't like success is that I feel like success in the capitalist world is described as something that has to do with like wealth, like having an empire. Sometimes when you hear like very narcissistic people talk about like wealth and success, they often talk about like having empires, and even that word is very much used in like reality shows titles, and that is code, it's semantics, it's a culture being formed. And I rarely often talk about like memetics. Like I think I want to make like a video on memetics as a whole. When it comes to like my videos, it's a lot about memetics and how concepts are replicated just like genes throughout time, but instead of influencing the phenotype, they influence the culture, and that's where it holds power. That's where memetic, because then it just fragments concepts and words to give them other definitions, because the information not only is it scattered, but it's also something that is shared very rapidly. There's this false idea of comfort that comes like with like financial success and progressing in life with your career. All of these things, like being able-bodied, being like thin, like all those things that today are seen as like peak of success, whether it be physical and everything, are truly like forming a mold. Often the people who get there, oftentimes those people don't deal with bad manipulation and abuse. And that's why most politicians today are manipulators, those who are not get. This idea of success is like so dense, and it holds so much value for big companies that, yeah, it's not worth it. That's also why now for companies that hold so much data on their clients, like Google, owning a quantum computer is such a great asset, because in the future you can capitalize even more on that. I feel like I have to say this. Alphabet, which is like the home company of Google, has a quantum computer. And a quantum computer can process information that we, without it, would process in a lifetime or many lifetimes. With the right softwares, that don't actually exist, but they're making sure that they will in the future. They will be able to predict so many things. And not only that, but be able to do reverse programming. So of everything that you're being exposed to with medias, whether it be like predictive programming, will eventually play a huge part in the scenarios that they plan and they execute with your mind. So yeah, food for thought. I remember that I attended a conference a while ago, and it was, I think, at the university. The University of MIT was organizing it online, and I remember that what they literally said was that they were missing softwares for those computers because the math is not yet very much understood by the scientists to develop like a fully functioning software. But it's not that far from like it is gonna happen at one point. Someone's gonna see the pattern. Some people believe more in the government, others don't. Some people believe more in like where the dictionary holds value. In the value of a dictionary, other people don't really do that. Like it depends again on the mindset that you have. However, they still hold power tangibly today. I feel like having this idea of success that is owning a lot of property so that when things go bad, you can host your family. That's amazing. That is actually a good accumulation of wealth. But just like owning tons of assets and say that you can weigh a billion, what does a billion really represent for you? You're not going to live with all that money. If you're someone who lives normally, who doesn't have access to like, or just doesn't want to do things excessively, then yeah, you don't need to do that. Let's just be honest, the number of parties those people throw, I'm talking about like people like the Kardashians, for example, because people are always like outraged on them, but what they do, I feel like, is like quite normal in like their locality. They just be doing that, you know. And I've seen the same behavior happen also in Africa and other parts of like the world. So it's something that is just common to wealthy people now. Why? Because the wealthy class for most part has been and is still being developed by colonization. It's just that. And so this idea of like I'm gonna become a millionaire and I'm gonna be super successful, what power does it really hold? What I've been talking about is what you're going to reproduce, and there's no question about that. Why? Because the system is so effective. This is editing me. It's I want to say that all theories, I feel like in general, when they're written in the Western world, are projecting stuff. They rarely have this stuff that comes from like the lived experience. In modern science, Western science, I feel like value is more given to the synthesis and like to the final destination than really to the theory in itself and how it was the seed of this theory is usually a lived experience or just an idea. And for example, not to fall into like my definition series, but I have like the fact that the definition of epistemology literally says the theory of knowledge is considered to be the mind's relation to reality and what it is for this relation to be one of knowledge. Do we know things? If we do, how and when do we know things? Like you're over questioning stuff that you're already leaving. So it not only that does like a weird thing in science where, how to say, the most idealized idea is then the one that will be adopted by the rest, and they will not budge until they found it or they found reason to say that it doesn't exist, as if there always should be reasons rather than just actual cycles. Like we know that nature has a cyclical aspect to it, but we deny it every time we do stuff like this because then we don't see value in individual experiences, and we also don't show individuals how to have clear boundaries because we just want stuff to just spread, you know. The way that this narcissistic personality kind of like infiltrates not only in the institutions through racism and capitalism, but also among different people, is because it has to be like spread like kind of like a parasite. These are humane consequences. They are not below humans. They are not different than other humans. They're just humans who lack maturity, honestly, and who are very hurt. If you don't look at that very specific aspect of yourself, then you don't give yourself room to go forward. And that's often the issue that we have with people. People are becoming less thoughtful of their experience. Report that they don't have inner voices. Since intelligence is now being kept by our like different computers and different machines that we use to assist us in our lives, intelligence is actually decreasing in the human population. And I think that you can see that how it is linked to whiteness, because for example, let's just talk about like the different vice debates. I make articles sometimes. I made an article about that on my Patreon. I truly believe that if a world where men like this,
Ow!
But
Jump scare.
I would hope that it's not the case, and I don't want it personally. I like people with substance, and it has nothing to do with wealth. It's something that offers power, offers opportunities in the world that we live in, which is immense. Like it's a privilege. That's why it's called a privilege. However, that's not synonymous to wisdom. That's not synonymous to maturity. Age, just as age is not synonymous with maturity, is not as rigid as people like to pretend it is. I consider myself privileged, that on many aspects, not only financially but also culturally. So the only issue with all of this is that there's this like fallacious idea of what is success that is agreed upon by everybody now. Because of that, there's this weird feeling of doom that comes that notion of privilege, but also the situation we are all in. Because when you are talking to people who are privileged as much, but maybe they didn't introspect enough to deconstruct and to just dismantle the mindset that they were implemented in their heads at a very young age. If they don't try to choose a path for themselves and don't want to be adults and just keep on repeating what they've been taught because it's easier, it's just easier. It requires less effort. It's what's being presented to you. You didn't have to go like out of your comfort zone for that. Them appropriating certain concepts, our people actually. It comes in every community. I've seen that a lot, is that you see people who are very privileged. They believe they're going to change the world in like a very, like they're the heroes of the story. Create infrastructure that will make them compete with other countries. We don't want competition. We want progress. We want actual reflection. We want actual understanding of what is happening, and empathy, sympathy, and not just like something that will make you seem more valuable to the rest of the world, not something that will enhance your reputation. We don't want saviorism. We don't need that. As much as it offers, like it provides like a quicker, there are not that many people who are from the diaspora that actually like give money back to the continent in bulk. Some people at least have access to basic needs, and we have the youngest generation as well. Like we have the youngest population, but I digress. We don't have people in our diaspora in Europe, from what I've seen, people who do those things and who are not just interested in like having a better CV. That white savior complex that we talk about when we talk about white people can also be applied in a way to Black people. I personally am not someone who dreams of Wakanda to be my country. I know what it represents. I know that it's very comforting to see this on TV nowadays, but it's not reality. And spoiler alert, I'm gonna spoil you Black Panther 2, so it's been out for like so long now. It's not my fault if you haven't seen it. But yeah, I remember that I love the second movie. I don't like the first movie is okay, I don't like the representation of Africa it gives. I wasn't so thrilled by the conflict because it pictured to me a very old vision of what African Americans or Black Americans had of Africa and Africans. Hello, so it's editing me again. I just wanted to add that I feel like the representation of Wakanda in all of the movies was kind of more like an ethnocentric American, African American, and just American to me. An aesthetically pleasing fantasy of what could be African liberation from white people and Europeans in general, rather than like really a true connection with the land and the people that stayed there. Oftentimes, the looks of the characters kind of made me think of National Geographic famous pictures and kind of like a blend of it. And when it also came like to different usage of certain cultures and just like inspiration from those cultures didn't really make any sense to me, because if you are African, you recognize, you know for sure that the way a culture is preserved and just evolves throughout time is mostly impacted and just influenced by the environment of the people. So knowing that Wakanda is supposed to be located somehow in like Central Africa and is not very open to other African countries, it's kind of weird to me. They have this weird position that kind of is similar to me to the one that Switzerland has in Europe, where they are this kind of like financial technological heaven where people have like a very high way of life, and it was just supposed to be fantasy. But these days I'm being obsessed with the series of Dune. I personally don't really like the way that it's written, because I've started reading the book, but I can tell for sure that when you look at Denis Villeneuve's adaptation of the book, it stays pretty truthful to the book, but it has like very significant change. In Dune, the book, the endings are kind of like very psychedelic looking. At least that's how they're described. They look like big bugs and have a lot of like very strong, vivid colors. In the movie, you see that it's closer, the aesthetics is way more natural and more and less about fantasy, even though it is a fantasy. What I like about Dune is that it kind of like gives you the idea of scale in the human experience, so that how you see and can consider how the errors of one generation can either trickle down to the rest of the descendant, or just affect people so much that true political change is put in place. Anyways, I really liked Black Panther 2. I like the reasoning behind that. I didn't quite know if Namor was an enemy or like a villain, an enemy or like a friend. And that's what I liked about him, is because he was then questioning like the mentality of the audience. I mean, I feel like people who have seen like criticize this movie and who are Black, because I've seen white people criticize it as well in French, and I was not thrilled by the way that they analyzed the movie, but it was still quite relevant. And I've seen like Black people, they empathize with the Mayans. They empathize with their conflict because the common interest is seen and it's shown in the movie. So I just love it, honestly. But when you look at reality, it's still not what is, and I don't think that we have much time. So for us to move forward so that we have that type of technology, looting has to stop in the continent. Reparations have to happen. That's the like very concrete, like tangible event that needs to happen, and people are still discussing if it needs to happen, and that's what kind of like bothers me. What I think sincerely like is like the only advantage that Africans have over like the Black diaspora, like people who actually grew up in Africa, is that they know what it's like to be in a country where the majority is undeniably you, offers so much more power than anything. And why I say that is because it's something that has been harvested today still by the elite of other countries. They come, they settle because of colorism, just self-hatred, internalized racism. They simply have access to higher positions with higher revenue very quickly, like in the blink of an eye. They don't need to be qualified for what they're doing, but just having a white person sounds good. So yeah, they're going to be there. So when I'm looking at Black Panther and all this like romanticization, idealization of what living on the continent is, I find it sad, because every single thing we do today is correlated to life there. I just have a hard time not having my entire way of thought like around like daily life and the culture I've been assimilated into. All those questions, they always rise up, and it's happening every second. That is why there's this like dilemma happening of like the question of survival, but you can't survive all the time. The thing about this society is that it's like rooted in individualism. So it's always about like hyper independence and how you sustain yourself. This thing that needs to happen need collaboration on all levels. True cultural revolution needs to happen as well. And the video I'm about to show you is a panel debate on the term Black and African American. And it was featuring Kwame Ture, Hamona Edeline. I hope that you enjoy and that it can be some food for thought for you. The panel is completely available on YouTube on the channel Afro-Marxist, and if you want to watch it like more thoroughly and understand more of the context, feel free to check it out as well. I will leave a link in the description box.
Let me just go to Mr. Ture here. In the 1960s, as I said before, you were one of the ardent proponents of using the term Black. How do you feel now about abandoning it in favor of African American?
Well, I do not even use the term African American. I use the term Africans because that's what we are. We are Africans in America. There's nothing American about us. Our history has only been a history of struggle in America. We are the only ethnic group in America who have to shed our blood to make reform. To get the vote, we must shed our blood. To get our children to school, we must shed our blood. To get on a bus and sit where we want, we must shed our blood. To even get in a filthy 5 and 10 cent store, we must shed our blood. So I don't see how we could be American. We're Africans in America struggling against American capitalism. And only until it's destroyed will we enjoy the rights that everyone else is speaking of.
Well, how do you respond to that, Mr. Llewellyn?
Well, what he's trying to do is to change the name of the game or change the rules. And I haven't got time to change the rules. I've got to look at what is. I guess I'm more practical about this. Maybe the ideal panacea is to change the rules and make it all a kind of a equal socialistic state. But in the meantime, let's talk about what is. This is a capitalistic society. We are here. We are paying our taxes. We are doing work each and every day. And I think we have the right to participate. We have sent people to war since the revolutionary times and spilled our blood for America, from Crispus Attucks and the Revolutionary War all the way down through this Vietnam. So therefore, I want to get what you can construe as my piece of the action like everybody else has gotten. And it really annoys me to see people who haven't made this kind of contribution over the years come here and feel that they can claim it and get it. And we have done that.
You have a response, sir?
Of course. In the first place, just because we're in just because we're in the capitalist system doesn't mean we must love it. We were made slaves. It doesn't mean that while you're a slave, you must love slavery. A conscious slave, while picking cotton on the plantation, is thinking about how to escape, how to bring freedom. Therefore, just because we're in capitalism doesn't mean we must enjoy it. We have to fight for an equal society. That's our history. Our people show that we spill blood instinctively to advance humanity. And we have this responsibility to advance America, yes, to a socialist state.
You would seem to imply from your comment that capitalism is utterly inconsistent with Africa and Africans.
It is.
But I would posit that that's not true. If you look again at the nations of Africa, if you look at African people in every country of the world, especially in recent times, they essentially want things. They want products. They want the things that it's, at least up to this point, demonstrated that only capitalism, with its imperfections and with its inequities, which hopefully some people believe can still be tamed, people want things. And I don't somehow see a worldwide Pan-Africanism as also spelling the death knell for capitalism at the same time. It seems inconsistent. There are too many people who want cars in Lagos, Nigeria. Last time I checked, the traffic jams are horrendous.
I don't think we can solve that one right now, but let me just go back to Ramona Edlin. because both Mr. Winter and Mr. Llewellyn talked about how they don't think it's possible to leapfrog over a lot of history and go back. It's impossible to go back to the agrarian life, that you can't even pinpoint a place in Africa where black people come from, if I'm paraphrasing your comments correctly. How do you respond to that?
Well, first of all, our culture and heritage in Africa entail far more than agrarian economies. Mathematics and science were born in Africa, philosophy and religion, and as well as that, we've been accomplished musicians and dancers for centuries. There's so much in our cultural heritage that we need to recoup right now, particularly for the children. And it is possible to leapfrog, as they put it. As a matter of fact, it's not only possible, it's necessary, because if you begin with slavery, then you will still have children looking in your eyes as they do in mine, in our cities and in the streets, and saying, what difference does it really make to you, to me, or to anyone else, whether I live or die, whether I take drugs, whether I kill another person, whether I learn anything in school? We have a responsibility, and I think that one way we can have a cultural renaissance is to identify with a land base that gave us the wonderful things about our nature and our culture.
Mr. Llewellyn?
Well, that all sounds very nice and wonderful, but I invite you to take a look at Africa right now and today and look at the situation in Eritrea against Ethiopia and all the other things that have happened, Biafra with the Nigerians and what have you. That, in my opinion, is idealistic and not the gut of the problem. The gut of the problem is something called values. The gut of the problem is something called family. The gut of the problem is something called importance. What do we construe and believe to be important?
I would submit that without a cultural offensive, without our unifying at this particular time and saying what we believe in and who we are and how we will train our children and what our families mean to us, that we will continue to have those same gut issues. That's precisely the point. We will continue unless we develop a cultural vehicle which will move us forward. All groups move forward by strength of their culture. It is a myth that individuals move forward. And certainly we cannot accept 2 or 3 of our group emerging year after year while the vast masses of us continue to go down. We have a responsibility.
Let me raise a point back to you, Kwame Ture. When you launched this move that resulted in black being adopted as the defining symbol for African American people, many people felt that it helped to purge them of all the negative feelings about themselves, that it really represented the first major psychological break. And you heard the woman in the tape talk about black is beautiful. I mean, that was the most positive affirmation of blackness by black people. What do you say to people now who say you simply cannot abandon the term that came to symbolize so much for black people?
Human progress does not stand still. It moves. We came here as Africans. One of the first organizations we had fighting for us is known as the Free African Society. The very first independent organization we had in this country was the church. It was known as the African Methodist Episcopalian Church. So from Africans, our oppressor has changed us to colored, to Negro, to this, to that. We understand it's a step. Coming to black had a powerful point, because the point was that we were oppressed because of this color of our skin, and this was racism. But this fight is not just a fight over the color of our skin. A fight for power is a fight for land. When Mr. Llewellyn speaks about power, he's talking about land. Our land is Africa. America is not our land. It belongs to the American Indians, and we have a right to stand and take a moral struggle with them. And we don't worry about people being for things. People want things is incorrect. The point is not to explain the world. The point is to change it. If the people want material things, then we have a responsibility to tell them that things more important than material things, like freedom.
So I kind of like ranted a lot, but I forgot to give you guys my definition of what success is. Well, to me, success is something that has to do more with self-mastery and trusting your environment as much as you trust yourself. To me, a successful adult is someone who knows themselves, recognize their own pattern, is empathetic, is able to rely on others and grow and be part of a community. And I don't think that community has to be like centered around liking the same thing. It just has to be with just living in the same space, living in the same environment, and being interdependent instead of codependent or just simply avoidant. The capitalism we have accepted as our system, and not really accepted, we were more like forced to accept it as our system, is pushing us further and further away from this notion of success. And it's putting us in such a situation that, you know, many people, whether they're my age or a little bit older, have decided not to have children because the world we live in, as the earth we have today, is not optimal for life, and especially life as human beings. Now many people see themselves or the presence of humans on the earth as a cancer or something bad that is happening to the earth. I'm not okay with that, and I don't really agree with that. But for sure, if nothing is put in place to change the system and to just dismantle it, and you know, by the time we've dismantled it, having like our cultures just like more our cultures more directed towards a healing journey. If we don't have that, then of course there's no need to have children. I myself have been debating this since I was a child, where I'm like, I love my motherland, but I also see the different dynamic and systems that are put in place to keep us subservient, and not only that, but just in very poor conditions. And that is not something that I want my children to experience. I don't want and I don't want to live the world like this. So I feel like as humans, when we give birth to children, and just like when we have descendants, we should worry more about what we're actually leaving for them and to them. And I think that's a huge thing that was disregarded by the previous generation. And I'm talking about like boomers and, you know, the oldest people living on this earth. They don't think about it because they've been so conditioned by whiteness and just capitalism that they just don't think about these things. We have grown to be an unempathic species, and I don't think that's ideal. So yeah, if you enjoyed my video, if you enjoy my content, please make sure to follow me on my socials and to keep yourself updated on what I'm doing, because I also want to make workshops now. I want to be able to offer workshops to people on like different thematics around like race and then, you know, emotional intelligence, especially for Black women. I want to be able to provide spaces for them to digest their feelings and they can safely and progress through life. Thank you again for watching, and have a great day.